Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 1% Better Recruitment Podcast with your host, Charles Kiriakou. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Louise Gilmour, who is the founder of LVG Recruitment. Louise, thank you for joining us. How's it going?
Yeah, good. Thanks for having me on.
Nice one. So, Louise, before we crack on, we've got quite a few interesting topics to talk through, but you've had a quite an interesting career in the recruitment space, and obviously now you've founded your own business. Why don't you just give people who may not know who you are a bit of a lowdown to your career and to what you've done in recruitment to date then?
Yeah, perfect. So, obviously, I'm Louise. I currently run my own business, which is a rec-to-rec business in London, LVG Recruitment. The start of my career actually didn't start in rec-to-rec. I was in TA. My main kind of market has been always TA across London. So I started a business called Chapman Black. I was there as probably their first TA hire that they had into a team. Started with them as a TA consultant, worked my way up in that business. And then I moved on to be the global head of TA for Signify Technology. That's probably where I had, I suppose, the most success in my career and where I really found my feet as a TA consultant and across the market as well. I developed that business from 12 people, one office in London, to at its biggest 88 people across 3 offices globally, so the UK and the US. And then from there, I always set my heights on running my own business and really felt like I could, I suppose, offer something different to the rec-to-rec world with my experience across TA. I wasn't just solely focused. Of course, sales is so important in the job and across TA in every role, but I wasn't solely focused across just sales and just focused about doing the deal. I wanted to offer more than that, which was, I suppose, the consultancy piece and the TA piece that I'd learned from my career, really.
Yeah, nice. When we first spoke, I mean, we've been in communication since because we both set up our businesses at a similar sort of time, right? But
Yeah,
when we spoke about jumping on the pod, you mentioned one of the first topics you wanted to cover was like the perception of talent acquisition.
yeah,
And I think you and I had a conversation about this because I think it's relatively similar to L&D in the respect that, when I got into L&D, one of the first thing the senior leaders said is, some recruiters might say to you, you're just a failed recruiter and now you want to train people, which is quite the opposite. And now, you and I run our own businesses. We have to go out and win business ourselves. So I've literally got to practice what I preach, and I'm assuming it's the same with you. But yeah, on that, you mentioned about the perception of talent acquisition. Why don't you just sort of elaborate on your thoughts around that then?
yeah. So, and that is always something that, to be honest with you, has come up throughout my whole career. Perception of TA, you're just a failed recruiter. Some of the consultants across the floor would even give you that vibe, would give you that feedback, maybe would even, in the early days of my career, be a bit standoffish to like building a relationship with me as a TA, because I don't think they necessarily saw the importance of the role. Now, I do think that that has evolved now. And in more recent times, I do think the perception is slightly changing, maybe because, people are speaking about it a bit more, or that they do just genuinely realize the importance of having a world-class support function, L&D, marketing, TA. Like, there is so much emphasis on making that world-class now. But yeah, throughout my career, I've always had that you're a failed recruiter vibe to me. I even, like we spoke about before, like even when I'd be interviewing for job roles, they would try and steer me away from doing TA. Like, oh, you come across really well, you're salesy. Why don't you go into a 360 role? And I'd be like, no, I can actually build myself a super successful career in what I'm passionate about, which is making a difference to the business, seeing the value that I can add to a business, and like living and breathing it in TA. And that was where my passion lied. So yeah, that is definitely something that's come up.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I for the first few roles I worked in, we never really had an internal recruiter. And in my last job, I sat next to the internal recruiter and realised how bloody hard that was. And you and I spoke
Yeah.
about this, and I mentioned that I would sit there and she would be doing candidate qualification after candidate qualification, like 30 minutes for like literally the entire day. And I just thought to myself, like, personally, I would just get burnt out so quickly doing that. I need to have a lot of variety. I liked being able to,
Yeah.
I couldn't be an account manager. I really loved winning new business and then having different roles to work and whatnot. So before we talk about how to build a successful career in talent acquisition,
Mhm.
um, what do you think it takes to be a TA? Because I don't think I could be one. I've been asked by some of my clients come in and help us with internal recruitment. I don't think I could do that personally. I don't think it's my skill set. What do you think makes a successful internal recruiter or take a TA?
I think it's what I mentioned just previously is like genuinely caring about the value that you're going to add to that business and the journey that that business is going to go on, and realizing the importance of the role that you play in that journey. If you're not driven by seeing the success of the consultants that you bring into that business, if you're not driven by, I suppose, offering people a real opportunity to go on that journey with that business with you,
Mm.
then it probably isn't right. Like, it could be seen as maybe a bit of a boring role in some people's eyes. As you say, there isn't so much variety to it. You are selling the same business day in, day out. You are speaking to people about the same thing, I suppose. The variety comes in what you make of the role and
Mm.
how big you can actually create that role. So yeah, I would say it's about being driven by different things as maybe a 360 consultant might be.
Yeah, that's a really, really good way of putting it, to be honest with you. And I think it takes a certain type of individual. I mean, for an example, my wife winds me up when people ask her what she does for work, and she says, I work for the civil service in their recruitment team. And I just roll my eyes because I'm like, you don't work in recruitment. You literally are essentially a compliance officer. You just like you scan documents and you do job adverts and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But she really enjoys having a task and completing it, whether it's boring or not. If she can just do like a mundane task and complete it, for her that's like quite exciting. She makes that exciting. So yeah, I think that's a really interesting point you made there. So what about then either people looking to start their career in talent acquisition or people that are either fed up of the 360 role or want to try something new and wondering about building a career in a talent acquisition position within a recruitment business? What's your advice on how to build that career then?
Yeah. Um, yeah, I think I can only talk from like my experience. A TA as a whole, specifically within recruitment, what I did to ensure that I was personally successful. The first thing was ensuring that I was in a business that I was genuinely passionate about. Like, there is no way that you could sit there talking about the exact same thing every single day if you're not passionate about it or you don't believe it yourself. So I think making sure that I was in a business that I loved, and I'd actually get a lot of feedback from my consultants or from candidates that say like, you are so passionate about this business, you know exactly, like, if they had any questions, I'd know exactly how to answer them because I really sort of took the time to understand every single aspect of that business, every single answer to any question that any consultant would have. I'd be able to answer it for them, more so than just, you can speak to the hiring manager about that. I think that is super important to start with. If you're not in a business you're passionate about, I think it's time to find a new business, to be honest with you.
I
Like,
agree.
it is. The second part is, if you're in a business you're passionate about, but maybe you don't feel like you're having as much impact as you want,
Mhm.
or you're not gaining as much buy-in as you want, the main thing for me was immersing myself in the sales culture. Like, I had to be so involved in the sales culture and the sales teams that, like, they would almost see me as an extension of them, not
Mm.
as she's just in back office. Because
Mm.
without that, it would have been so hard to influence the hiring manager's decisions. And with being able to do that and with building like a good relationship, I suppose, with those people, it enabled me to have better impacts on the business because I could get the people who I knew would be right for that business a job, I suppose, get them through the process and influence the hiring decisions. So yeah, they're probably my like two really key points. And I do think that sometimes businesses maybe push TA, L&D and the ops side, but I think specifically for TA, it to the back office and to the support functions, but without being able to influence the hiring managers, you're never going to be successful at your role.
That's really, really good advice. And I think having the internal recruiter or the TA, whatever you want to call it, work alongside all the recruiters and really, really be amongst it is so important. And
100%.
I noticed from my perspective when I was an L&D manager, being amongst everyone, being on desk with people and feeling like I was part of the sales team as well. And, you know, being able to stand up and go, right, Louise, that was a fantastic call. Right, let's go and listen back to it. You know, if someone turns around and goes, "Oh, client's just come back to me. How do I do this email?" I had that yesterday with one of my consultants, and they literally just pulled a job because one day they just sat there and turned around and was like, "I've got this client. I don't know how to write this email," and I just coached them through writing an email because I'm on desk with them. The only time I would say for you and I, like, you know, if we were both employed again, where I wouldn't want to work on the sales floor would be if I was just creating content and stuff, because working with a bunch of young recruiters, you know, just shouting and being on the phone all the time. If I'm sat there having to build a PowerPoint presentation or, you know, do my LinkedIn content, I'd have to just be away from people. But other than that, being on desk, it's just, it's so important, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that's like for your role, part of your role would be creating content, whereas like my role is so similar to a consultant's role that like those kind of things didn't really crop up for me. Like actually being on desk, being around people every single day, like I'm such an in-office person because I think to be successful for what I do, I have to be involved around it. I have to be there, be present. That, yeah, for me, it's probably less apparent to, you know, have some time away. Like, I don't think I actually even need that. I need to be in the thick of it. And it's something that back at Signify, Ryan would always say to me, like he'd be managing me from London from the beginning of my career, but he then moved to the US to grow the US side and managing me from obviously remotely. He would always be like, if someone's not in, go and sit in their seat, like sit around that team, go and sit in their seat and push yourself to be there, be present, know everything about that team, be able to sell that team, be able to influence their decisions, be involved, get them to see what you do as well and understand your role. And like that is so important. And from there, I used to do that all the time. Go and sit with perm, go and sit with contract. And I do think that massively helped.
Yeah, that's really powerful to have that, because I feel like a lot of TAs kind of fall into that back office kind of
100%.
mindset where it is, you know, I don't want to be amongst them. And, you know, I think that's a really, really good attitude. And I think also very good advice for people looking to either build a career or just get into TA. Something you mentioned there, and I know this wasn't necessarily like on the agenda, but I hear this chat a lot about the whole work from home and remote and all the rest of it. I had a chat with a bunch of the recruiters I was working with yesterday, and a couple of them said if I was starting my career again with zero experience and I was allowed to work for a business that had, you know, full remote work from home whenever you want, unlimited annual leave, I don't think I would develop to the person I am today. Now, you just mentioned there about being a very in-office type of person. I think when I started my career, I know when I started my career back in 2014, no one had laptops. There was no such thing as work from home in recruitment. You know, it was like round the clock, 24/7. What are your thoughts, especially for like trainees and like maybe a year or two experienced consultants, you know, working from home 2-3 days a week or so? What's your thoughts on that?
And it could be controversial because a lot of people are so pro working from home. But like I think it's detrimental to them being successful. Like a trainee consultant sitting at home with no one there to answer their questions, no one there to for them to listen into, no one there for, you know, the quick fire things to help them, their day flow so much better, for them to be on the phone and your manager to be sat next to you and just give you a little bit of feedback or a little bit of a pointer. Like, that could be the difference of doing a deal. That could be a difference of, you know, so many things. Like, I think that it's really bad for the success of trainee consultants, to be honest. Like, I just don't think that you can say that it's more successful or it's better for them to work from home. And there's been such an emphasis on it as well. Like, through processes now, most of the consultants are putting an emphasis on what the work from home policy is rather than what else that business offers them. Like, you know, the opportunity, the training and development, the team that they can be around, the markets. Like, there is so much more that should be focused on than what the work from home policy is. And I think maybe it's got a little bit better. So maybe in the next couple of years, there'll be less emphasis again and again. But for me, I think focus on a business that has you in the office more than they have you at home.
Well, that's actually, you've segued perfectly into our next topic, by the way, about finding and choosing the right business. But just to piggyback on your point, I would love to sit here and be controversial and disagree with you so we could have like a really cool debate.
Yeah.
But I actually really agree with you on the point of a trainee consultant, because if I look back to how I was as a trainee consultant, I was an absolute nightmare to manage because I was the most distracted person, and I used to distract people more than anyone else in the office. So being at home, living with my mum, working in my bedroom with my PlayStation next to me before I learned what discipline meant, I can't imagine I would do an awful lot. Now,
No.
I'm not saying that all trainee consultants are sat at home watching Netflix or playing their PlayStations, but I think it goes to what you just said there, that when you're in the office and you're on a call and you're a trainee, and maybe your business doesn't have like a playbook, or maybe you haven't really had proper thorough training, and you make a phone call, sometimes my manager, and it did annoy me, but it made me better. Sometimes my manager would just sit there and, like, say, for example, I was like taking a brief spec on with a client on a cold call to then try and book a discovery call, and my manager would just be hovering over me going, book a meeting, book a meeting, book a meeting. When are you available? So I'd sit there and just say, like, oh, so would you be available to book a meeting? Open questions. And I'm like, what's your availability next week? Should we do video call or should we do an in-person? Oh, you're in London, like that. And I'll get off the call and my manager will high-five me and go, great call. That was amazing. You got a meeting. Where is it? Et cetera. So those types of things that for a trainee, you just can't really have that working from home.
No.
The only thing I will say, the last sort of closing point, is once you've kind of got a year of experience, you kind of prove yourself, you know, you've got a few clients, like you know how to do the job. I think that working from home a couple of days a week, as long as the company has been trained how to manage people remotely properly, because I don't think enough companies know how to manage remotely. They just say, go and work from home, we'll catch up tomorrow. And then they're like, oh, you haven't done anything, so you're never working from home ever again, which is completely wrong. Then I think that certain things that you can do, if you plan your day right, working from home can mean that you have literally no distractions. But that's my 2 pence on that.
Yeah. And I do agree. Once you've got experience, it's a different conversation. But purely on the trainee point, I stand with what I've said.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. So you mentioned there that a lot of people are looking at that for when they're choosing a business, right? So what else from your perspective, because you obviously work with multiple different businesses now, you've worked within quite a few yourself.
Yeah.
What are the main things people are looking for when joining a recruitment business these days?
So from an experienced perspective, I think people are always looking for the same things without realizing it. A lot of people put an emphasis on the shiny things that are in front of them. So, you know, working in a business that has got a £1 million biller, or working in a business that is in one of the like sexy markets, we call it, like the markets that are up and coming at the moment, which is probably renewables and AI. They're the new tech, which was tech, you know, 5 years ago, I suppose. a lot of people put a lot of focus on that. And I think all of those things are massively important. And they should influence your decision slightly when you're looking at a new business. But I don't think necessarily they should be the be all and end all. And I don't think necessarily they should be the focus for you first of all. What I would say, and what I always advise the consultants that I'm working with, and it probably comes off the back of them giving me, through the qualification, giving me the reasons why they're looking to leave their business, is really focusing on the business as a whole. So the business, the environment that it's going to offer you, and ensuring that it's an environment that works for you to be successful. And that could be different for me, and it would be different for you, of what we look for, but genuine environment that works for you. The management style of the manager you're going to be reporting into, what style they work with, question them so much around that, because it has to be a management style that, again, works for you and enables you to be successful. And you can probably use the previous experiences that you've had. If the management has been good, align it to that. Or if it's been bad, make sure you're not seeing the same trends, I suppose, in the new manager that you're going to be reporting into. Even the things like the style of recruitment. Like, I work with some businesses that their style is very, very phone-based, very headhunt heavy. And I work with other businesses that is probably more community and network focused and referral focused, and it's slightly different. What works for you isn't necessarily going to work for another person, but making sure that the style of recruitment you're going into aligns, again, with what works and is successful for you. And like the overall values of the business, the goals of the business, how that can make you successful and how well aligned you are to that, is, for me, overruling the shiny new market, the clients and the warm desk, because those things don't make you successful. It's about everything I've just mentioned, setting you up for success, and aligning correctly. And then the other things come. Long term, the billings will come in if you have all of those things ticked. Long term, the progression will come, again, if all of those things are ticked. So that's always my advice.
Yeah, that's really good advice, to be fair. I think the values piece for me, I really learned that after, I'm not going to say which position it was, but I had a company that I worked at that literally didn't have values. They didn't have values on their website. They never mentioned them. So if a company doesn't have values that they abide by, then what is right in their eyes? And how does one act within a business that doesn't have values? It's just, you just can't. So when I set my business up, and, you know, I've always had a set of personal values, and they kind of go into what I do with my business. Whenever I meet a brand new business now, and we have that sort of commercials conversation, and they say, you know, what your pricings and stuff like that, I always ask them, tell me what your values are. And normally you get clients say to you, oh, you know, honesty, professionalism, blah, blah, blah. Okay, cool. How do you actually externalize them? How does that show in your day-to-day as a leader? Yeah. And honestly, Louise, you'll be so surprised with how many like managing directors and founders, they'll look at you and go, oh, Christ, no one's really asked me that. I don't know. And we just got told by someone we set it up to just write some values up on the wall. And it's like, guys, like, you really need to be strong with those values, because
live and breathe them.
Exactly. Yeah, you literally live and breathe them. And if you ever want to discipline someone, you need to sit there and say, look, our values here are is transparency. What you've done there is behind everyone's back. It wasn't transparent. We say to be professional. You've not gone back to your candidate. You've not done that. That's why we're disciplining you. And people understand it. But I think it's quite a difficult thing, really, isn't it? If you're like 18, 19, 20 years old trying to get into recruitment, do many 18, 19-year-olds even know what values are? Do they know their personal values? I don't know.
Yeah. I think it could be slightly different for someone coming into the industry for the first time. And I do think, as bad as it might sound, it's a little bit of luck where you end up the first time, because you probably are drawn in mostly to the person, the interviewer, selling to you. And how good they are at sales is probably the business that you're going to join. And we always have this thing, it's like, If a consultant, a trainee consultant, the first time coming into the industry, the job that they will take is the interview that they had last. And it's because it's the sales that sticks in their mind, and it's the person that they remember, and they're just driven by their gut feeling towards that.
Yeah.
So I don't think necessarily they will be clued up, I suppose, in going into all of that detail. But hopefully there's even some things like, the managers that they're working with and the environment that they can look into. Some people's, like, if as a trainee consultant, you're going into an environment that is heavily phone based and you're scared of the phone, then you probably are going to look out for those things. But the real depth of it, I suppose, is super important coming into the business you choose once you've had a bit of experience.
Yeah. What about companies that you have worked with, since setting your own business, where perhaps you've said, I don't think I can help you for X, Y, or Z reason? And a bit of an example, and I won't name names, but I've worked with a client before I've worked with a couple actually who have complained about Rec to Recs kind of ghosting them and all the rest of it. And I've basically just said to them, like, look, what you offer in comparison to the rest of the market is not good enough. And if you can't explain to me why I should join your business over, say, this business, then why would a Rec to Rec waste that? With respect, why would the Rec to Rec waste their time when they could quite easily spec a profile out into London and get 10 interviews somewhere else?
Yeah.
So from your perspective, what would you say companies do that make you say, I don't think I can help you, or I'm not sure I can find people for you?
So I think it goes back to, as well, like, being in TA, and something that I had to put a huge emphasis on is just being able to sell the business and being very upfront and honest. When somebody first asks you about that business, you can explain everything to do with it. I got on a call with a real startup business. So there was 3 of them, and they were the founders, and they were looking for their first 2 hires. And when I asked them questions like what I've just mentioned, what's the goals of the business? And they were like, they hadn't thought about it yet. And I was like,
wow.
But those things are so important. And if you're asking for an experienced consultant, like a principal consultant, if you jump on the phone call with them and you can't explain the goals of the business, how do you expect that consultant to want to go on that journey with you? And they were like, okay, cool. Well, I think we need to think about that. And it resulted in, them going away, coming back to me with some extra information. I suppose it was a bit of a task for them. They had never hired before. They didn't really realise how important those extra things are. They just thought, we have a great product, our market's great, we're billing loads of money, and that's all we need. When in actual fact, I think that there is so many more things I'd put above that.
What other things would you put above it?
Things like I've mentioned before: goals, values, opportunity, journey that you're going on, and how you can explain that journey and how that person can buy into that and be a part of that. All of those things are what you should be massively selling in an interview stage, at least.
Yeah, because what you said actually, and it's just popped into my head now, and it makes a lot of sense. When you're joining a business, if you bill well, in most businesses you'll earn well. There's not very many recruitment businesses that have absolutely and you, I'm assuming, and I've only known you, but we've only spoken probably twice, but I'm assuming you'd be the type of person to call out a business if it's like, we have a flat 5% commission with a 10 grand what's it called, threshold. Like, obviously you'd call that out, but most recruitment businesses, if you bill a couple $100 grand, you'll earn decent money. If you're billing a couple $100 grand and that business has got good values, you abide by those values, likely you're going to progress your career quite quickly. And that for me is one of the things I love about recruitment is, and you and I both run our own businesses now. So not only do you have to do recruitment, not only do I have to do coaching, but you've got to do the marketing, you've got to do the branding, you've got to do the finance, the business admin, so many different things. You learn that in recruitment. You learn that in the job. You learn these business skills, you learn these people skills, and it's one of the only careers that if you join in when you're 20 years old, you can be a director by the time you're 25. There's not many other careers that you can do that. It's mental. And you've seen this as well, right? You see like 18, 19-year-olds earning more than than doctors and
Yeah,
surgeons. They're like 19 years old. Like,
insane.
it is wild. It is absolutely wild. So I think the last topic we wrote down here was how businesses can stand out and hire the best people. So I think you've kind of gone into a lot of detail already about some of the fundamentals. So if, let's say, for example, a company has values, they've got a good vision, good mission, they've got their structured goals and all the rest of it. But then there's 10 other businesses that have got a similar type of vision. They want to sell the business in 5 to 10 years. They're going to open an office in Austin, and they've got an incentive trip to Vegas and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
Like, what else can businesses do to hire the best possible people in the market?
Say having a genuine USP to your business. People really buy into whatever that one thing is. So if I relate it back to Signify, back in the day, I think, and I believe it's the only business I heard of that was doing it, was their one USP was huge emphasis on branding. And like Ryan hired a marketing manager as like his 5th hire into the business. Like, it was such an important part of his business, and a part that I genuinely believe made that business successful was branding. Before personal branding was even a thing, he was doing it. And that was a big USP for that business to be successful. But also, they were specialists. They were specialists in what they did, and they still are. But they were genuine specialists that pushed that, I suppose, narrative. And within that, they'd done so many things that not other businesses weren't necessarily doing at that moment in time, like attending and sponsoring conferences and seeing the deals come off of the back of that, or the relationships that they were building off the back of that. Genuinely being at the forefront of anything to do with meeting people face to face, being immersed in their market. They even ran their own events where they invited all of their candidates to come and speak about topics that they would be passionate about. They even offered training. They facilitated training with top industry experts for their candidates. And then that enabled the candidates to improve, which then enabled the candidates that they couldn't place because they were a little bit too junior, that in a year's time they would go on to place those candidates. And like, these was like real core USPs for that business, but people absolutely loved it. Like, consultants loved it. Like, they can really go, wow, I've never heard that before. And they're doing all the other things, all the fun things, the incentive trips, everything else. But they were like,
Of course.
I have genuinely never heard of a business that offers that service or that offers something else. So I think that is key. Another business that I'm very familiar with, their USP was the way that they only ever hired experienced consultants, and they had a minimum bar of 250k of billings, no matter what that market was. Otherwise, you wouldn't even get an interview there. And then, so anyone joining that business was like, wow, I'm going to be surrounded by top performers. I'm going to be surrounded by, they call it A players. And again, that was a genuine USP for that business, something they would never deviate from. So that, for me, I think is like key, understanding what your core USP is and the differentiator between you and another recruitment business out.
Love that. One of the major things that I do whenever I work with a business is I try and simplify things as much as possible, and especially because my main sort of niche is business development, right? A lot of businesses don't really have like a BD like strategy. It's a case of, here's 1,000 contacts that are on our database, go
for it.
And it's just like, because a lot of recruitment businesses these days do try and lean into the fact that they are specialists, but I feel like if you're specialist, like, I don't think that should be your only USP. What you've just explained there actually got me excited. It was really infectious. Like the thought of hosting events, going to events, doing the training for our candidates and stuff. That type of stuff is so out of the norm for a normal recruitment agency. So that for sure, I think is something that, would really separate people from others. But do you know what really shocks me as well, because you mentioned there about your old company hiring a marketing manager as like their fifth hire.
Yeah.
And this is going to sound so biased because I'm a trainer these days and I'm a coach, right? But so many recruitment businesses have no clue how important that is for retaining good people. Even like hiring someone with a 250, like who just recently billed 250K, right? And maybe their business went bust and they're looking for a new company. Like some of the best people I work with from like a, I enjoy coaching, etc., are the top performers. People that have billed 300K that want to do 400K. People that are a team leader that are billing 150K whilst managing 10 people, but want to manage 15 people. Like,
Yes.
I think a lot of companies are missing the boat with having someone come in and just take over that training piece. Do you know what I mean? I think that for sure. And again, I'm not just saying this to like plug my own thing, but like I think that is a major USP for consultants at any level joining any sort of business.
Yeah, absolutely. And it kind of goes back to what we said at the beginning, is like building that world class support team, and actually how much of an emphasis businesses, maybe some businesses do realize the emphasis and the importance of it, but I think it's becoming more and more spoken about. And I think it's proven that without that, it'll be really, really difficult to scale a business.
Oh my God, so much so. When I joined a company called Projectus back in 2016, I'd done contract recruitment for 2 years prior. So joining them, I was going to do a completely different market, but I could kind of lean, because it was medtech, I could kind of lean a little bit on doing healthcare recruitment for a little bit. But it was permanent recruitment. So it was a big, big shift. And I remember on day one, Tim's wife, who was like the ops director and kind of, she was part-time because she had 2 kids at the time, but she'd done a little bit of the L&D as well. She sat me down and went through like my disc profile. I was like 22 at the time. I didn't know what a bloody disc profile was. And then she took me through like a different psychometric profile as well, showing my EQ, my IQ, and I was a high dominance and high conscientious or whatever it was. And I was
Yeah.
looking for all this type of stuff. And then she was explaining like, look, this is from the tests that you've done. This is the type of personality you have. Here's how we want to work with you. Here's how we're going to triple down on your personality traits. And these parts here, this is how we're going to help develop you on those parts. And then this woman called Pippa came in, and she was like a consultant L&D person. And she's like sat down listening to my calls, and we're going into the side room. We're listening back to pre-recorded calls. I'm sat there like, I've never had this before. This
Yeah.
is mental to me. And I just remember thinking, like, I had such loyalty to this business because they cared so much about developing me. And when they introduced me to a guy called Ricky, who's an NLP coach, he'd done like a presentation. They like rented out like a pub for the afternoon, and we had some drinks. And then this guy done a presentation on neuro-linguistic programming. And Rebecca, who is the ops and L&D director, she came over to me like towards the end of it, and we'd had a few beers, and she put her hand on my shoulder and was like, did you appreciate us having the external guy come in and all the rest of it? And I just burst out into tears, and I hugged her, and then I just said, you know what, Rebecca, like, I can't explain to you how happy I am, because I had been like flat broke for so long, and I've come from a family where my mum was on benefits, so we didn't really have a lot growing up. I've always wanted to get into personal development, but every course I looked at and every talk was like 500 to $1,000. I couldn't afford that. And the fact that this business has said, we're going to get this person in that's going to develop you as a human being, and as a consequence of that, you'll probably get better at recruitment as well. Oh, I was ready to die at that company. Do you know what I mean? I was like, oh my God, this is the best. So I think for other businesses, like, honestly, like investing in your employees' wellness and personal development and professional development, it really is a massive USP.
It's so valuable. That's so valuable.
Cool. All right. Well, the final question that I try and wrap these podcasts up with then is, after today's show, how can people get 1% better off in recruitment?
I think for me, to be 1% better, I think you have to be surrounded by someone who specifically inspires you. I think that is so important. And that would be my first thing. Is if you're not around a consultant, a manager, a leader that inspires you every day, look for that person, find that person. That's so important. And my other thing, it ties into probably a lot of the businesses that we've spoke about, but is really find your niche and find your specialism, and like absolutely own that, because I think there is no value that can be put on being a genuine specialist at what you do, a genuine specialist in your market. They would be my two things. Yeah, my two bits of advice.
Love it. Well, Louise, thank you so much for coming on. I think honestly, for people that are looking to go into TA to begin with or looking to transition into TA, I think you're certainly someone to learn from. And just by listening to what you were saying when you were talking about the days at Signify,
Yeah.
that level of enthusiasm, the passion, and how contagious that is,
Yeah.
it's infectious, right? And I think for someone to be successful in a TA role, they need to really embed themselves into a business and really like be a part of the growth and just like really be passionate about that vision of the business. And I think for companies that work with like Rec to Recs and stuff like that, they need to see people as an extension of their brand. And I genuinely feel like what you've said, you are that person who is the extension of their brand, not just a spec out gremlin type of thing, you know?
Absolutely. And that is what I would stand by too, 100%. So, yeah, it's been great. And thank you for having me on.
No, you're more than welcome. So, in order for people to reach out to you, and what can they reach out to you about? Just obviously for the last couple of minutes, feel free to kind of plug anything you want. So, yeah, how do people reach out to you?
Yeah, so obviously LinkedIn, absolutely. Like I'm on LinkedIn all the time. Otherwise,
Hmm.
my email address, I don't know if you'll add it in, but it's louise@lvgrecruitment.com. My main niche and my specialism is the London tech market. But as an extension of that, renewables, clean energy, clean tech, those types of markets are really what I know the most about. And yeah, I'll be more than happy to support anyone who is looking for a new opportunity, or businesses that consultants can get excited about. I'm always open to partnering with new businesses as well.
Nice one. Again, thank you very much, Louise. And yeah, have a great day, everyone.